Hey everyone, I'm LaRosha, and welcome to The Explainer. For the last 7 months, it's been a one-way street. The market has been on this absolutely relentless AI-fueled rally. But last week, everything changed. It was like someone slammed on the brakes, and all of a sudden, some of the best news we've seen in months started to look, well, a lot like bad news. So let's unpack what on earth happened. So this is the big puzzle we're going to solve today. How is it possible that some of the best earnings reports we have seen in years led to a massive sell-off? A sell-off that sent shockwaves all the way from Wall Street to Seoul. It feels completely backwards, right? But the answer tells us so much about the state of the AI boom right now. And just look at the numbers, the split was so clear. You had the tech-heavy NASDAQ falling over 2%. South Korea's KOSPI got hit even harder, dropping almost 4%. But at the same time, you had defensive sectors, like healthcare, actually gaining nearly 2%. This wasn't just a dip, no. This was a full-on rotation. Investors were literally fleeing high-growth tech and running for safety. To really get what happened, I think it helps to look at it as a kind of butterfly effect. You know the idea. A butterfly flaps its wings in one part of the world and causes a hurricane somewhere else. Well, that's pretty much what we saw. A small, unexpected event in the US tech world created a financial hurricane, and the eye of that storm passed right over Korea. So what was that tiny flap of the butterfly's wings? It was the Nvidia Shock. Now, Nvidia, they're the undisputed king of the AI revolution, right? They came out and reported these absolutely spectacular earnings that just crushed every single expectation. And then the unthinkable happened. The stock actually fell. And that one thing, that one moment, it triggered a massive crisis of confidence. The question on every single trader's mind was pretty simple. If the undisputed leader with news this good can't go up, what hope does anyone else have? And that fear just spread like wildfire through the entire sector. Okay, so this brings us to the real reason for the market's bizarre reaction. It wasn't about the news itself being bad. It was amazing news. It was all about the sky-high expectations that came before it. And this all comes down to a really important financial concept. The concept is called being priced for perfection, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's when a stock's price isn't just reflecting reality anymore, it's reflecting this dream of a flawless future. And when that happens, even fantastic news can feel like a total letdown, just because the market's dream was even bigger. Here's a really great way to think about it. Imagine Nvidia is that straight-A student who always gets a perfect 100% on every test. Well, the market wasn't just expecting another 100. The market had priced the stock as if that student was somehow going to magically score a 110. So when Nvidia delivered only another perfect score, the market was actually disappointed. It was a huge red flag that the valuation had just gotten way ahead of itself. Right, and that anxiety, that disappointment, it did not stay in the US. The nervousness from that Nvidia shock immediately started rippling outwards, and for tech-heavy emerging markets like South Korea, it turned into a full-blown hurricane. So here's how that works. When big global investors get nervous about their riskiest, highest growth bets, what do? They sell them first. It's called a risk-off move. They pull their capital out of places they see as more volatile, and right now, that means markets like Korea, which are so deeply connected to the global tech cycle. And the sheer scale of this was just staggering. Foreign investors sold a net 14 trillion won in the Korean market in just 1 month. Now, to give you some perspective on that number, that volume of selling was even bigger than what we saw during the 2008 global financial crisis. That's how big this shift in thinking was. Now, a massive sell-off like that puts incredible pressure on the local currency. The exchange rate is now getting dangerously close to crossing that 1,500 won to the dollar mark, and that level, it's this huge psychological barrier. When it gets crossed, it tends to spook investors even more, and you get stuck in this really dangerous negative feedback loop. So, all of this uncertainty means that after a week like that, you can bet all eyes are on what's coming next. And even though it's a holiday-shortened week in the US, there are 3 absolutely critical pieces of data coming out that could really decide where the market goes from here. First, and this is the big one, is the PCE inflation data. This is the Federal Reserve's favorite way to measure inflation, so it's going to have a huge say in their next interest rate decision. Second, we're going to get a read on the consumer with all the Black Friday sales data. And third, Dell is reporting earnings, which will give us a really vital sign on whether companies are still spending big money on the hardware that actually runs all this AI. Okay, so what's the bigger picture here? Where does this leave us? I think the AI boom is really two sides of the same coin. And that really explains the very different anxieties that we're seeing in the US compared to what's happening in Korea. See, in the US, all the bubble talk is centered on the AI software and the chip design companies, like Nvidia, where these crazy high valuations are being questioned. But in Korea, the focus is totally different. It's on the hardware, the memory chips, the stuff from companies like Samsung and SK Hynix. This isn't the speculative part of the market. This is the essential, must-have foundational infrastructure.
And that right there leads to the single most important takeaway from this whole situation. Whether or not every AI software startup becomes profitable, the physical infrastructure, the servers, the data centers, the memory chips, it absolutely has to be built. That demand is real, it's foundational, and it provides a really strong floor for Korea's semiconductor sector, even when the rest of the world gets volatile.
So that leaves us with the million-dollar question, doesn't it? Was last week a sign that the AI boom is finally hitting its peak? Or was this just a healthy reality check, a moment for the market to catch its breath before the next major leg up? I'd love to know what you think. I'll see you next time.